Let's look at two of the very first actors to play Superman and compare their takes on the Man of Steel, from how they looked to how their friends and enemies were portrayed. Hold on as we journey back into time, before kids had television sets even, and stormed theaters for a weekly fix of superheroics, to the early days of television when Superman was piped right in the homes of families all across America, an exciting time when fun was only limited by one's imagination and was only heightened by what was seen on the screen. It was a time when millions of kids were still reading comic books, and comic books were truly coming to life on screen.
Superman!
Of course, I'm talking about Kirk Alyn from the Superman movie serials of 1948 and 1950, and George Reeves from the TV show The Adventures of Superman. So let's get started. Let's take a trip back into time, way back to 1948, when kids were rushing to movie theaters every week to see Kirk Alyn fly through the air as Superman. Well, sort of. I'll explain later. The two Superman serials, starting in 1948, were the first to bring a live-action Superman to the movie screens of America. Let's dive in and find out what special effects they used to bring Superman to life on the Superman serials, and then compare that to the special effects that George Reeves had available on The Adventures of Superman, the 1950s television series. The movie serial Superman, starring Kirk Alyn, used mostly 2D animation to do Superman's flying scenes. Now, early on the Adventures of Superman TV series, George Reeves started out using wires, but then there was a mishap which caused him to have an injury. During filming of the Superman and the Mole Men feature, the wire supporting Reeves snapped and he fell to the studio floor. Now, this is probably why in the episode The Mind Machine you see a stunt double on wires instead of George Reeves. But this is kind of rare to see. And they got away from wires completely by, I believe, season 3. Perhaps it may be ironic to say that it's just interesting that in the 80s, wires were how they made Superman Christopher Reeve fly so convincingly. Now, apparently they did try to use wires in the movie serials with Kirk Alyn, but it didn't work out so well. Kirk Alyn said in the interview that they tried to use wires, but they couldn't get it to where you couldn't see them. In the second serial, they did start to do like close-ups of Alyn where he's standing with smoke clouds and fans going to make it look like he was flying. And they did this in addition to the animated Superman flying. Now, later on, they relied mainly on Reeves leaping on springboards to simulate him taking off in flight. You can see in the episode The Evil 3, the springboard is actually visible when Reeves leaps off into the air. Techniques for landing involve Reeves jumping off a ladder or holding an off-camera horizontal bar and swinging down in the frame. Eventually, they came up with a cool wireless solution where Reeves could lay on sort of a pan with a pole sticking out that could be manipulated by men out of the frame to move Reeves around as he was supposed to be flying. Now, most people remember George Reeves smashing through walls, but how about when Kirk Alyn did it? They use a cartoon for just a split second whenever Superman crashes through cave walls, which has perplexed me as to why they needed to do that. After all, George Reeves bursting through fake walls turned out to be the best effect for that show without any animation needed. And the interesting thing is that when Kirk Alyn comes out the other side, it's actually him and not a cartoon. There was once in the 6th season of the George Reeves series where they used animation to represent ground that Superman was tunneling into, but it didn't look very convincing. When it comes to bullets bouncing off Superman's chest, I think they did it pretty well in both the movie serial and the TV series. In the movie serials, you could actually see the bullets bouncing off Kirk Alyn's chest, but of course they were animated, but they looked pretty convincing. With George Reeves in the TV series, it looked like sparks flying off his chest. When it comes to stunts, George Reeves and Kirk Alyn had to do a lot of their own stunt work. Reeves loved to use his acrobatic skill to literally fly into a scene, while Alyn might have surpassed Reeves in levels of danger and having the most weight to carry around. In Chapter 2 of the first Superman serial, the first appearance of Superman has him holding a broken rail together so the train containing Lois and Jimmy can pass safely. Now, don't brush this scene off as no big deal. You see, the amazing part is that the special effect here is really Kirk Alyn himself. He said this in an interview years later. They tried using a stuntman, a stand-in for me, in the beginning, but once they previewed the rushes, they decided that the audience would never believe this guy was me. He didn't look like me, move like me, or act like me. So they asked me if I minded doing the stunts myself. I said, sure, I'll do them. That's where all the fun was anyway. In one scene, I was positioned 18 inches from a railroad track with a train barreling by at 90 miles an hour. Now, if you don't think that's scary, nothing is. If the slightest thing had gone wrong, it would have been all over for me. It was a very dangerous scene to shoot. I was supposed to be holding the track in place so the train could zoom by safely. I had to hold it long enough for the train to pass, and the train never slowed down. Moreover, I had to pose for the cameras at just the right angle. Fortunately, the train whizzed by me before I knew what was happening. Alyn was in top physical condition. Apparently, most of the time, Alyn had to carry real people and make it look effortless. Just when he was carrying real people and when he was carrying mannequins, it's hard to tell sometimes, but he had this to say about it. In one bit, I was supposed to turn into a flaming building, pick up these two people, and carry them off to safety. Well, I picked each one up in a different arm. We did a couple of takes, but for one reason or another, they had to shoot the scene several times. After a while, our director, Spencer Bennett, came over to me and said, "That was good, Kirk, except I saw the veins in your neck puff out a little bit. You seem to be straining." "Damn it, Spence," I said. "This is about the 8th time we shot this scene. You try to carry real people 8 times. They're not dummies, you know." He got totally flustered. "Oh, geez. You're not supposed to carry real people. Where are the mannequins? Bring out the dummies." Well, like I said, looks like to me most of the time it was real people he was carrying, but there was this one scene that I'm pretty sure it was a couple of dummies. Check it out and see what you think. On the Adventures of Superman TV series with George Reeves, there were a few times that dummies were noticeable. Of course, they were in a difficult situation where Superman has to carry people around and make it look easy. Now let's look at the supporting cast and characters of the serials and the TV series.
It's may I come in? And the answer is yes, you're in.
The first time we see actress Noel Neill as Lois Lane, she's on a doomed train, and this becomes Superman's first rescue in costume. It's kind of coincidental that Kirk Alyn and Noel would appear in the Superman movie on a train together. Unfortunately, they cut that scene from the original theatrical release, but thankfully it was restored for the extended version.
Lois, please read your book.
Lois could be downright mean sometimes in these serials.
Clark Kent couldn't find his way in out of the rain.
Someone mention my name?
In one chapter, she leaves Clark stranded on the side of the road. In chapter 11, she loans Clark her car, and then she reports it stolen just to get ahead of him on a scoop. Of course, she gets into trouble, and Superman has to break out of jail to rescue her. You know, I'd have seriously been tempted to take my time if I was Superman. And Lois gets into trouble an awful lot on these serials. Of course, that's probably not surprising. You'd think she'd learn to be a little bit more cautious after a while. See what I mean? Of course, Noel would go on to play Lois Lane again on the TV series of the 50's, starting with the 2nd season, where she replaced Phyllis Coates, who quit after the 1st season.
Here. Don't you push me!
And I don't really think anybody knows why Phyllis quit after just 1 season, but I could be wrong about that. Noel Neill went on to star in The Adventures of Superman from Season 2 to Season 6, and would be associated with Superman the rest of her life, doing appearances on various Superman projects and making public appearances related to Superman. Now back to the Superman movie serial. Jimmy Olsen was played by Tommy Bond. Bond seemed to be wanting to play Olsen as a tough guy. And it's no wonder, because he was most famous as the bully, Butch, on the Little Rascals. Of course, they say in real life he was a gentle soul, but you can't fool me.
I'll see that you do land in jail.
Now finish, mister. You can take it from me.
He told me to go jump off a bridge.
Yes. Well, why don't you go do that while I see Mr. Kent?
Jack Larson played Olsen a lot less rambunctious than Bond did. More of a golly gee whiz kind of guy.
Yes, sirree, Chief. That young reporter is sure learning fast.
He wasn't exactly the type of dude that would volunteer to mix it up in a fight. Now, Bond, on the other hand, played Olsen as a dude that was always in the middle of a fight almost every other scene. Unfortunately, Jimmy Olsen got knocked out more times on this serial than any other character I can think of. In real life, Olsen would have had permanent brain damage from all the concussions.
Happened. Now get out, all of you, and find Hackett, and don't come back until you do. Get out, all of you!
Watkin was hired to take over the role of Perry White on Adventures of Superman, the TV series, after John Hamilton died in 1958. But when George Reeves died shortly after Watkin was hired, the show was canceled. And however, his second stint at being Perry White wouldn't have lasted long, as he himself died in 1960. He did, however, make 4 appearances on Adventures of Superman as different characters. Kirk Alyn definitely looked like Superman. I can't think of another actor that looked more like Superman apart from Christopher Reeve. He did have a couple of quirks, like looking both ways before he committed himself to any direction. Alyn comes across, though, as very wholesome, the way you expect Superman to be. He looked like he was having fun, though, and that's 90% of what makes a movie or a show fun to watch. You can just feel it when the actors aren't enjoying themselves. As to why Alyn didn't take the role of Superman on the TV series, he said this in an interview. When they shot the second serial, they discussed the possibility of a television series with me. The casting director asked me if I wanted to do the TV series, but in a manner that discouraged me from doing it. You know, Kirk, now we can't pay you a lot, and we don't know if it'll catch on or not. And so I said, well, if you don't know how well it'll do, then there's no sense in prolonging the agony. I've got enough troubles anyway. I'm going back to New York. Now, in all honesty, George Reeves doesn't look like the comic book Superman. Not as much as Kirk Alyn, but back then there was no kid in America that would have ever doubted that George Reeves was Superman for a second.
That's one of the bravest things I've ever seen.
You mean it's something you'd only expect Superman to do?
Well, yes.
I have to wonder what the series would have been like had Kirk Alyn took on the TV series. But I'm sure we'd still be talking about it to this day, just as we do with Reeves in the part. But I think we would have missed out on something, just as surely as we missed out on what Alyn might have done. Reeves did bring a certain kind of magic to the show that clearly spoke to kids across the land at the time and beyond in the future generations. His early death has created a ripple through time that is yet to be halted. The Adventures of Superman never featured any supervillains from the comics. Other than the occasional touch of sci-fi elements in the show's stories, villains were always classic gangster-like thugs. The serials had Spider Lady, who looked like she could have come out of a comic book, and the second serial featured Lex Luthor, Superman's greatest foe. Their version of Lex Luthor appears to have influenced John Byrne's 80s Lex Luthor in the comics. In the John Byrne comics revamp, they turned Luthor into an evil businessman who wore a suit and tie. Now, this movie version is both a genius and an evil businessman who owns a TV station. Luthor was played by Lyle Talbot, who did a pretty serious no-nonsense kind of Luthor. Coincidentally, he also played Commissioner Gordon in the 1949 Batman and Robin serial. It is funny how they incorporated the occasional sci-fi element into the Adventures of Superman without any actual comic book villains, like the short feature film George Reeves did, Superman and the Mole Man. This movie actually came out right before the series and was turned into 2 episodes later on. It featured weird alien-looking creatures who live under the ground. And then there's the episode where Superman saves the Earth from an asteroid, and one where he actually travels back into time. Both George Reeves and Kirk Alyn brought their own unique gifts to the character of Superman. Alyn brought his acrobatic skill as a dancer, an almost Hercules level of strength, as he was often asked to carry live people and make it look easy.
This looks like a job for Superman.
And George Reeves was the man of action who brought a super level of charisma to the character of Superman, and a bit of magical charm that made all kids believe he was actually Superman.
Don't miss the next thrill-packed episode in the amazing adventures of Superman.
Want more stuff on Superman? On TV Crazy Man, I've got some good Superman goofs from television, questions answered on the Adventures of Superman, Super Friends goofs, and lots of other cool TV superhero stuff. This is the channel for reliving the good old days. If you would, please subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell for future notifications so you don't miss any more videos later on. Let me know what you thought about this video. It really helps. I love to read comments. And please hit the like, because that helps the video out and more people see it. Thanks. Y'all have a great day.